The sun was a copper coin dropped onto the vast, dry landscape of the Arizona Territory. It beat down on the cracked earth and the dusty streets of Mesquite Springs, a town barely clinging to the edge of civilization. The air smelled of stale whiskey, sun-baked cedar, and the sweat of men who worked hard or worried harder. A cloud of fine, ochre dust rolled up the main street, preceding four riders. They were hard-looking men, etched by wind and trouble, but one held the eye. William H. Bonnie, better known as Billy the Kid, sat tall in the saddle, his young face sharp and almost handsome beneath the brim of his flat-crowned hat. His movements were fluid, loose, and watchful. Beside him rode Doc Scurlock, older and quieter, a man whose hands knew medicine and the stock of a Winchester equally well. Charlie Beaudre and Tom O'Folliard trailed behind, their leathers creaking with every rhythmic step of the horses. They were the Kid's loyal core, men who followed him not just for coin, but for the strange, rough justice he sometimes dealt. They reined in near the Lucky Star Saloon. The sound of their horseshoes on the packed dirt, the jingle of their spurs, and the squeak of their gun belts cut through the town's usual midday quiet. Every eye on the porch of the general store, and every shadow moved toward them. This was the way of the frontier. Strangers were either trouble or the salvation from it. Billy dismounted, his Colt 45 resting low on his hip. He didn't go for the saloon. Instead, he crossed to the Mesquite Springs Land Office, a small adobe building with a sagging roof. A handwritten sign, barely legible, was tacked to the door. "Will return. Bad business." "Place is shut tighter than a miser's fist," O'Folliard muttered, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. "It ain't the lock that keeps the door shut, Tom," Billy replied, his voice unexpectedly light, cutting through the tension. "It's what happened here. Let's ride on down to the undertaker's, Doc. A closed business speaks louder than an open one." At the far end of the street, the undertaker's shop was marked by a plain wooden cross leaning against the porch. Inside, the cool, dark air provided a stark contrast to the blinding glare outside. The scent of pine shavings and formaldehyde hung heavy. A woman sat silently on a simple bench next to a pair of newly built raw wood coffins. She was not old, but hardship had aged her beyond her years. Her dress was clean but patched, and she clutched a worn Bible. This was Martha Cleary. "Ma'am," Billy said, removing his hat. He wasn't accustomed to formalities, but respect came naturally in the presence of raw grief. "We heard tell of some trouble. 2 men, they say. Her husband and brother, Mr. Cleary and young Jamie." Martha looked up, her eyes ringed with exhaustion and unshed tears. She saw the famous outlaw, the legend whispered about in every camp and town, but she spoke without fear. "They were gunned down 3 days ago, mister, right here in the office. They were fighting for their claim, a small patch of good grazing land the Bar 7 outfit wanted. Not a fair fight, you understand. 3 hired guns ambushed them. Cowards, not men." Her voice was a dry, raspy whisper. Doc Scurlock gently placed his hand on the back of the bench. "Did the sheriff get word, ma'am? Anyone bring the law down on those killers?" A bitter, humorless laugh escaped Martha. "The law? Sheriff Tate is a shadow in the pocket of Mr. Jasper Thorne, the owner of the Bar 7. Tate didn't even ride out. He called it a dispute over property that got out of hand, said no witnesses could be found willing to testify." Billy stepped closer, the light from the doorway illuminating the intensity in his green eyes. "No witnesses, you say, but you're telling me about 3 men. You saw them, ma'am?" "I saw them ride in and ride out, kid," she corrected, using his name deliberately. "I was in the stable. They were 2 hulking brutes, the kind that don't look like they ever smiled, and the leader. He was quick, fast hands and mean eyes. They rode north, straight to the Bar 7 camp, grinning like devils. They took my husband and my boys' right to live just to claim some grass." The air outside the small building was thick with flies buzzing lazily, but the tension inside was a sharp, cold wire. Billy slowly replaced his hat. "What do you want, ma'am?" he asked. It wasn't a question of money or pity. It was a question of debt. Martha shifted her gaze from the coffins to Billy, meeting his famous stare with a desperate resolve. "I want justice, kid. The kind the badge won't give and the Lord is slow to deliver. I want their names read out loud, and I want them to pay the price for spilling innocent blood on my land. I know who you are. The law calls you an outlaw, but I heard stories that you sometimes stand for the common man." Her voice broke on the final word, but her posture remained straight. She was small, but her will was vast. "You're asking me to ride against the richest rancher in the county, Martha Cleary. Thorne pays his men well, and he bought his sheriff. That's a long ride to a cold campfire," Billy stated, his hand unconsciously hovering near the grip of his revolver. "I have nothing left to give you, kid, but my honest word and the truth of what happened. They took everything. If I have to walk the desert myself until the vultures find me, I'll do it to see those murderers brought low." Billy glanced at the two coffins. He knew this look. It wasn't about the land. It was about the violation of a simple, honest life. That was a line even an outlaw understood. "All right, ma'am. Consider it done," Billy said simply, his voice low and firm. "We'll find your gunslingers, and we'll give them the justice they earned." He tipped his hat once more. "We'll ride out at first light. You can keep your silence until then, can't you?" "My silence is all I have left, kid, and my gratitude. You have my word," Martha promised. Back outside, the sun began its slow decline, painting the sky in fiery oranges and blues. The gang gathered by their horses. "You're serious, kid?" Doc Scurlock asked, tightening the saddle girth. "Thorne's not a man to cross lightly. He has a lot of hired muscle and deep pockets." "Thorne is a bully, Doc, and a bully needs his nose blooded," Billy shrugged. "Besides, she asked nice. We're in it. We'll ride north and find the Bar 7 ranch. We'll start asking around the camps near the claim." As the four men prepared to leave Mesquite Springs, heading for an old, secluded ranch where they could plan, Charlie Boder suddenly stopped, his eyes narrowed, scanning the rooftops. "Hold up, kid. We ain't alone." Two figures, cloaked in dust and shadow, sat atop the roof of the bank building across the street. They carried rifles, long, serious-looking weapons. They weren't looking at the outlaws, but at the undertaker's shop and the land office. "Looks like Thorne's men don't just kill the witnesses. They keep a watch on the graves too," Billy observed, a grim line forming on his young face. "They know someone saw something. They're keeping an eye on the grieving widow. That means we have to work fast. If they catch a whiff of us asking questions, Martha Cleary won't last the night." Billy gives a sharp order. "Tom, Charlie, ride ahead. Find a place we can hole up. Doc, you and I are taking a quick ride around town. We need to know who those men are and what they'll do if they see Martha Cleary leave town or talk to the wrong person." The silence of the desert night was broken by the sound of rifles being loaded. The game had begun, and the stakes were higher than just a piece of grazing land. The wind howled a lonely tune through the mouth of a narrow box canyon, a natural fortress known only to those who lived and breathed the Badlands. Here, a small, hidden camp was set up. The smell of cedar smoke was thin in the air, mixing with the damp scent of the cool rock. Inside the canyon, shielded from the keen eyes of Thorne's spotters, the outlaws gathered around a sputtering fire. Billy the Kid traced a pattern in the dirt with a twig, outlining the Bar 7 range. The mood was serious, stripped of the easy camaraderie of the trail. "Thorne hired 3 guns, boys," Billy summarized, glancing at his crew. "1 dead, 2 captive. That's the deal we struck with the woman. This ain't about loot. This is about settling a score for the folks the law won't protect." Doc Scurlock, always the pragmatic one, laid out a map scribbled on a piece of rawhide. "The Bar 7 is massive. Thorne's main ranch house sits in a valley, guarded by a dozen riders at any time. The claim Martha was talking about is about 15 miles south, near the Rio Seco. The killers were spotted riding back toward the main house. We need to find out where they bed down. They won't be kept with the regular hands." "Too well paid for the bunkhouse," Charlie Boder agreed, checking the mechanism of his Colt Frontier. "They'll be near the boss, in a separate cabin, or maybe right in the main house." Exactly, Billy said, snapping the twig in half. Charlie, you and Tom will ride back east. Find the old Mescalero trail. It's rough country, but it will bring you within sight of the ranch, maybe close enough to spot a separate cabin. Look for fresh tracks, anything that says stranger. Tom O'Folliard grunted, adjusting his Stetson. And what are we looking for, kid? Names? Or just the smell of bad intentions? We need names, Tom, and we need to know their routine. Are they drinking, gambling, or are they standing guard, knowing someone might come looking? If they're worried, they're careless. Billy's eyes were sharp, calculating. We can't just ride in shooting. That's suicide. We need to take them one at a time, away from the herd. Doc Scurlock had been silently sharpening a large hunting knife. I'll ride back toward Mesquite Springs, kid. Thorne has men watching the town. If they're on the roofs, they're watching who leaves. I'll keep a low profile, listen in on the saloon talk. Hired guns always brag when they think they've gotten away with something. The outlaws split up, melting into the vast, unforgiving landscape. The desert was their ally. It demanded patience and silence, and it punished arrogance. 2 days later, the gang reconvened at the Box Canyon. The mood was tenser. The waiting had frayed their nerves. We got one name, Doc reported, tossing a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey onto the ground. Found out at the Lucky Star. Seems one of the gunslingers got careless. Jebediah Jeb Cross. A brute with a face like a dropped pie and a reputation for fast hands with a derringer as a backup weapon. He's the one who shot the Cleary boy. And the layout? Billy asked, his attention fixed. Cross is holed up in a small shack by the south gate of the Bar 7, a little distance from the main ranch. He thinks he's guarding the property line, but he's really just waiting for his pay. He rides out at sunset every day to patrol the new claim line alone, Doc revealed. He thinks his biggest threat is coyotes. Charlie Boda added his piece. We spotted 2 more riders in a separate cabin near the ranch house. They ride out together in the mornings, but always return before dusk. Cross is the loner. He's the weak link. He's the one who is isolated. Isolated and complacent, Billy finished, a slow smile spreading across his face. That's a gift? The outlaws drew closer, the firelight casting long, dancing shadows on the canyon walls. Billy sketched out his plan in the sand, using stones and twigs to mark positions. We hit Jeb Cross on his patrol route, right at sundown. The light will be in his eyes, and his horse will be tired. Doc, you and Tom will take up positions on the Whisper Ridge, overlooking the trail. If he tries to run, you cut him off. He looked at Charlie. Charlie, you and I will wait for him at the Dry Creek crossing, about 3 miles from the Bar 7 gate. It's a natural choke point. No cover for him, plenty for us. We taking him alive, kid? Or giving him the final judgment right there? Charlie asked, his voice rough. Billy looked into the fire, the orange light reflecting in his eyes. We need to know who the leader was. The one Martha said was, quick. Cross can tell us that. He gets to live just long enough to talk. Then we give him what he gave young Jamie Cleary. The planning was meticulous, focused, and deadly. Each man knew his role, and each check of their weapon was done with solemn dedication. This wasn't a bank robbery, it was a matter of principle in a land where principles were cheap. As the moon climbed high and the cool desert air settled around them, they checked their gear one final time. Billy polished the grip of his Colt until the ivory gleamed in the starlight. "Remember the rules, boys," Billy murmured, his voice firm. "No innocent blood. Only the killers pay the price. We ride for Martha Cleary and the honor of the frontier. Let's make this day count." The gang mounted their horses, the only sound the soft, muted padding of hooves on the soft canyon floor. They rode out under the vast, uncaring blanket of the New Mexico night, heading toward the patrol route of the first target. As they approached the designated ambush site, Charlie Boda suddenly stopped, his hand raised. A flicker of firelight, small but unmistakable, shone from a nearby unexpected cave overlooking the Dry Creek crossing. "Kid," Charlie whispered, drawing his rifle, Looks like someone else knew this was a good spot for an ambush, and they're waiting. The hunters had become the hunted just before the first shot was fired. The air was heavy with the silence that precedes violence. The last rays of the dying sun cast long, skeletal shadows across the dry creek crossing. The ambush site, a ravine banked by low sagebrush and jagged rocks, was now a potential killing ground. Billy and Charlie dismounted, slipping into the shadows near the creek bank. Billy signaled Doc and Tom, positioned on the far-off Whisper Ridge, to hold their positions. The unexpected firelight in the cave meant a dangerous variable. "Two ways to do this, Charlie," Billy whispered, drawing his Colt and checking the hammer. "We either pull back or we clear the cave before Cross gets here." "We ain't got time to wait." "Clear the cave," Charlie answered, his eyes gleaming with the predatory intensity that made him a good outlaw. No flankers, no surprise from the rear. They moved low and fast, boots crunching softly on the dry gravel. The cave mouth was a dark maw, but the firelight inside revealed a single figure hunched over a steaming can of coffee, a Sharp's rifle resting across his knees. It wasn't Jeb Cross. It was a man with a tired face and a dirty vest. He was a sentinel. Billy raised his hand, stopping Charlie. He needed silence and surprise. He drew a small, flat throwing knife from his boot. In a movement too fast to track, he vaulted the low rock wall and pinned the sentinel against the cave wall, the knife blade resting under the man's chin. The sentinel gasped, his eyes wide with fear, the coffee can clattering to the ground. Don't shoot, kid. I ain't part of the Bar 7 crew. I'm just a spotter." "A spotter for who, partner?" Billy's voice was a low snarl, lethal and close. "And what are you spotting for? Tell me fast, or I'll cut the tongue clean out of your throat." "Thorne," the man choked out. "Thorne hired an extra hand a few days back, a real snake. Name's Kane. Kane told us to watch this crossing. Said he heard talk of loose cannon justice coming from Mesquite Springs. Said to report anyone who looked like they were lying in wait." Before Billy could ask another question, the sound of a tired, trotting horse echoed from the trail. Jeb Cross had arrived. "Charlie, stay here. Keep this rat quiet," Billy ordered, retreating quickly. Cross was right on schedule, oblivious to the knife fight barely 50 yards from him. He was a big man, heavy in the saddle, his rifle slung carelessly. The sun was indeed in his eyes, just as Doc Scurlock predicted. Billy stepped out into the middle of the trail, his figure a silhouette against the last glow of the sunset. "Hold up, Cross!" Billy's voice cracked the stillness like a whip. Jeb Cross reacted immediately, his complacency shattered. He tried to rein in his horse, his hand flying to the heavy revolver on his hip. He was fast, but Billy the Kid was a lightning strike from the desert sky. Blam! The shot was clean and sharp. Not aimed to kill, but to incapacitate. Cross screamed, his gun dropping uselessly into the dust, and he clutched his shoulder. He tumbled from the saddle with a heavy thud. Billy walked toward him, his boots kicking up dust. Doc Scurlock and Tom O'Folliard rode down from the ridge, their rifles aimed. The captured spotter in the cave remained silent under Charlie's watch. Cross was groaning, blood staining the shoulder of his canvas coat. Who in God's name are you?" "I'm the reason you don't mess with honest folks, Cross," Billy said, leveling his Colt at the killer's head. "I'm here for the Clearys. You took their kin and their life's blood for a piece of dry dirt. You're going to tell me who the leader of your gang was?" "Go to hell, kid," Cross spat, his voice thick with pain and hatred. Billy pressed the muzzle of the Colt firmly against the man's temple. "You think dying slow is better than talking? You shot a boy, Cross. A boy! You're going to tell me who the fast one was, the one Martha Cleary saw. Give me the name, or you'll meet the devil before the sun is truly down." The terror in the outlaw's eyes was sudden and real. The kid wasn't bluffing. "It was Slater, Frank Slater. He's the fastest gun Thorne's got. He's at the main ranch house." Cross gasped, sweat mixing with the dust on his face. "And Kane said this was a trap for you, kid. He set it up. He knew you'd come for justice. Kane is waiting at the south gate." A grim smile touched Billy's lips. "Kane, looks like we already met his spotter." The information was delivered. Cross had served his purpose. Billy knelt beside the wounded man, the silence returning, heavy and final. "You knew the risk, Cross. You sold your soul for Thorn's coin," Billy said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You killed a husband and a son. The frontier doesn't forget that kind of debt." Billy stood and nodded to Doc Scurlock. Doc approached with the same gravity, pulling out the hunting knife. Justice on the frontier wasn't always clean. Sometimes it was visceral and absolute. They rode quickly back toward the box canyon, the darkness now total. The sentinel from the cave was tied securely to his own horse, a warning to anyone watching. Billy was grim-faced. The news that Thorn had anticipated his arrival, or at least that someone would seek justice, changed everything. "Kane knew we were coming," Billy muttered. "This ain't just about Frank Slater anymore. It's about a man named Kane who's expecting me. That means the Bar 7 will be locked down tight." Doc Scurlock checked the chamber of his Winchester. "Kane is a professional, kid. He's not just a hired gun, he's a tactician. He set up an ambush in an unlikely spot. If he's expecting you, the main ranch house will be a slaughterhouse." "Then we won't ride straight in," Billy decided, his eyes narrowing in the darkness. "We'll hit them where they don't expect it. We hit them fast. We go for Slater and we go for Kane. We finish this tonight." The gang rode toward the Bar 7, the wind whipping dust into their faces. The ranch compound was a dark, intimidating fortress against the black sky. As they approached the south gate, the location where Kane was supposedly waiting, they saw a cluster of riders, 5 men, not one, all heavily armed. They weren't waiting. They were riding out, moving fast, heading not toward the trail, but toward the hiding place of Martha Cleary. "They're not waiting for us to come to them," Billy hissed, spurring his horse into a desperate gallop. "They're going after the last witness. Charlie, Tom, take the compound. Doc, you're with me. We have to save the woman." The planned confrontation had turned into a frantic dual-target race against the forces of a ruthless enemy. The night was torn by the desperate pounding gallop of horses. The plan was shattered, replaced by raw instinct. Charlie Boder and Tom O'Folliard veered toward the main Bar 7 ranch. The compound was heavily guarded, but the surprise of an attack from the outlaws, who were meant to be ambushed elsewhere, might be their only advantage. Meanwhile, Billy the Kid and Doc Scurlock raced toward Mesquite Springs. Billy pushed his horse to its limit, the wind tearing at his clothes. The thought of Martha Cleary, vulnerable and trusting, fueled his rage. "Doc, keep your eyes open. This is Kane's trap. He knows the emotional leverage." Billy yelled over the wind. They came upon the ranch hands, 5 men led by a broad-shouldered figure, less than a mile from the town limits. The air instantly filled with the cracking thunder of gunfire. Doc Scurlock dropped one man with a precise shot from his Winchester. Billy drew his Colt and fired low, hitting a horse and sending its rider sprawling. The lead man, the one with the broad shoulders, immediately peeled away, a professional move. This was Kane. Kane pulled up sharply, using his horse as a shield, and fired his own rifle. The bullet whizzed past Billy's ear, kicking up dirt behind him. "You should have stayed in the hills, kid," Kane shouted, his voice hard and mocking. "Thorn pays to finish the job. No loose ends." Billy ignored the provocation. He was focused on stopping the massacre in town. He spurred his horse directly at the remaining Bar 7 riders, firing deliberately and accurately. 2 more men went down, leaving only Kane and 1 henchman. Kane saw his hired guns defeated and made his decision. He wheeled his horse and galloped toward the North Road, abandoning his henchmen and the mission to kill Martha. "He's running, kid!" Doc yelled, preparing to pursue. "Let him go, he's not the target tonight," Billy cried, pulling his horse back. "We have to check on Martha." They rode into Mesquite Springs. The town was silent, but the smell of gunpowder was heavy near the undertakers. Martha Cleary was safe, hiding in the dark storage room. She emerged, trembling but unharmed. "They came, kid. They knocked on the door and demanded I come out. Said they had papers for the claim. They were lying. I knew they were lying. You did good, ma'am, Billy said, his voice calming her. Now we have to finish the job. Back at the Bar 7 ranch, Charlie and Tom had started a chaotic, brutal siege. The main ranch house was a small, well-fortified building. We need to draw Slater out, Charlie yelled, taking cover behind a feed trough, the sound of returned rifle fire loud in his ears. Tom O'Folliard, positioned near the stable, fired 3 quick shots into the ranch house roof, tearing off shingles and wood. Slater, come out and face the man you murdered. Come out and take your punishment. The door of the ranch house flew open, and 3 riders burst out, riding hard toward the open plains. Frank Slater was one of them, easily identifiable by his distinctive red scarf. He was abandoning Thorne and running for his life. "They're bolted! Get them!" Charlie screamed, jumping onto his horse, the chase on. The pursuit was short and violent. Charlie was a superb rider and gained ground quickly. He fired a warning shot, which only made Slater's companions panic. Slater's 2 henchmen fell back, turning to shoot, but were cut down by a precise volley from Tom's Winchester. Slater was now alone. He pulled his horse to a skidding halt, realizing he couldn't outrun the kid's men. He dismounted in a flurry of movement, drawing his revolver and assuming the dueling stance of a man who lived and died by the quickness of his draw. Charlie Boder stopped 20 yards away. "It's over, Slater! You can run, or you can face justice!" "You're not the law, Boder. You're just a filthy outlaw!" Slater screamed, his face a mask of fear and fury. "Maybe not the law, but we're the reckoning," Charlie replied, his voice calm. The duel was swift. Slater drew first, his reputation for speed well earned. But Charlie, trained by Billy, was faster. Slater's shot went wide, hitting the dirt. Charlie's bullet struck true. Frank Slater staggered, fell, and the blood of the killer soaked into the contested earth of the Bar 7 claim. By morning, the gang was back at the Box Canyon. The fight was won, but the victory was costly. Thorne was still alive, and Kane had escaped. But 2 of the 3 killers were dead, and the main enforcer was eliminated. Billy rode back to Mesquite Springs alone, the rising sun illuminating the dust clouds behind him. He found Martha Cleary sitting outside the land office, still waiting, a vigil over the coffins inside. He dismounted and walked toward her. His clothes were torn, and his hand was bruised from the fight. But his eyes were clear. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat, "it's done. Jeb Cross and Frank Slater won't be troubling you or anyone else on the frontier. They paid the price for your husband and son." A slow, exhausted breath escaped Martha. No tears came, only a deep, profound sense of release. "And Thorne, kid? And his man, Kane?" "Thorne's rein is broken, but he's a snake who lives to bite again. Kane is running, but he knows who's chasing him now. They'll be looking over their shoulders for a long, long time. They'll learn that some debts, even on the frontier, are always collected." Martha rose, walking toward him. She didn't offer money, which she didn't have, or a handshake, which felt too common. She simply looked at him, the outlaw who brought justice when the law refused. "Thank you, William Bonney. You did what was right, and may God forgive you for the way it had to be done." Billy put his hat back on, the brim shadowing his eyes. "God and I, ma'am, we have our own separate understandings of right and wrong. I only hope your neighbors remember this, that there are some things money can't buy, and some wrongs that won't go unpunished." He mounted his horse, the sounds of his spurs and the creaking saddle once again filling the dusty street. He gave a final nod and rode out, leaving Mesquite Springs to mend its own wounds, a town briefly touched by the brutal, necessary justice of Billy the Kid. Billy the Kid and his gang rode west toward the setting sun, disappearing into the vast, indifferent desert. They left behind a terrified rancher, an escaped mercenary, and a town that would forever whisper the tale of the young outlaw who rode in, not for silver, but for a promise. The justice was delivered, but the long, difficult road of the outlaw's life stretched ahead, filled with more violence, more danger, and the ever-present question of whether their brand of justice was salvation or just another form of damnation.